Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for turning up if you were here yesterday, and hello and welcome if this is your first time. My name is Olu, and I am here with the New Black Film Collective. We are hosting this week of workshops called Procreate, which is it's part of the Soulfest 2021 program, and it's a week-long pilot, which is a precursor to a year-long mentoring program for Black film producers. It's within the framework of the educational strand of for Soulfest 2021. And for those of you who don't know, the program is going to be a cohort of 50 Black mentees who are going to be matched with 10 Black mentors from the film industry. They'll be working together, of course, in a safe space, and this is to allow their projects to live and breathe without any cultural restraints or any such restraints that people may feel. These producers will be given the opportunity through the festival to platform and to showcase their talent. So today we have Give Me Credit with the wonderful Jasmine Morrison. I'm just going to give you a quick background on Jasmine. Jasmine Morrison is an experienced film professional, and she's worked in production, post-production, and in film finance. She previously served as the investment manager at a London-based production and finance company, and has been involved in the financing of over 100 feature films, which is incredibly impressive. In 2019, Jasmine founded Soul Cognition, a film and TV consultancy company, which is committed to education on topics of film finance, sales, and distribution. She'll talk a bit more about that. Soul Cognition works with individual clients as well as hosting courses. And to date, Soul Cognition has hosted courses with Film London and Northern Ireland Screen. Jasmine has featured on both the Best Girl Grip and I always get this word wrong, sorry, Screenster podcasts discussing topics of finance, sales, and distribution. In addition to Soul Cognition, Jasmine also co-owns a production outfit on Mannered Limited. The company is currently in production on 2 feature documentaries. Jasmine serves as a consultant for Breaking Through the Lens and is a British Screen Forum future leader. Just a few quick house rules. Please make sure that your mics are on mute, just so that there's no interference while the speaker is speaking. If you have any questions, you can pop it in the chat. If you encounter any tech issues, just check your Wi-Fi connection, but this will be recorded anyway and to be sent out. At the end, a survey will be sent, so please look out for that in your emails. And you can live tweet as we're chatting, and somebody will place, excuse me, sorry, the hashtags will be placed within the chat for you to have access to. And we're just going to kick off and hand it over to the amazing Jasmine Morrison. Thank you very much for coming.
Welcome, everyone. I hope everyone is nice and rested on this stereotypical British Tuesday with all of the weather going on. I'm going to share my screen with everyone now, so I hope you can all see that. So today we're talking about a number of different topics, and if everyone's wondering why I'm looking over there, but you guys are all over there, looking at my other screen, so I can actually talk you through my presentation. So starting off, this document will be available to everyone following the session, so if you want it, request it with the amazing team. And first thing we're going to talk about is EIS and SEIS. Now, these are 2 things that people often ask me about. EIS stands for Enterprise Investment Scheme, and SEIS stands for Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme. So the biggest difference for the 2 is the amount of money that you can raise through either. So you can raise more money with EIS, less money with SEIS, but if you did do an SEIS, you can then still do an EIS later. So the seed is for really kind of small amounts. I think it's up to about 500k, and EIS is bigger than that. Now, a lot of people tend to ask me about this, mostly because of the fact that you used to be able to use EIS and SEIS as a kind of way to raise money for films. Now, the legislation around EIS and SEIS changed a couple of years ago for film, that you cannot use it for an individual film. You cannot use it for a single film production. EIS and SEIS was really created originally in order to be able to support businesses, to help businesses grow, to help young businesses grow. The whole point of that is also obviously from HMRC and the government perspective that the more businesses that there are, the more jobs there are, and that's obviously great for the economy. So EIS and SEIS is still available, but it is only available for production companies, i.e. a whole company that's looking to use the funding for a long established business plan. They are looking for businesses that are looking to be around for a long time. They're looking to grow, they're looking to hire staff, everything like that. So it needs to be, when you're thinking about going and raising money for EIS and SEIS, you'll need to put a long-term business plan in place. Things like, we're looking to create a company, and maybe if you're looking to do feature films, you'll say, we're looking to spend 2 years developing a number of projects, and then we'll look to, after that, have one film in production every year. Something like that. You need to have a plan for at least a 5-year period about how you're going to use the money, how you're going to generate more income, and all of these types of things. So HMRC will often like to see certain criteria for the companies making any application, such as things like a permanent office and employed staff. So if you're a single person who owns a company and then wants to raise money through EIS or SEIS, you're probably not necessarily going to be approved, especially if you're working at home, which is a lot of the way that a lot of us who run our own companies do work, because realistically rent for an office is expensive and we don't necessarily want to lose our income that way. So you've got to be aware of, there are lots of different parts of the application process. Now, I would say it's really, really important to work with an experienced accountant who understands EIS and SEIS and also works in the film industry. There is a lot of hoops to jump through, and if you do anything wrong, there is the possibility that you won't get advance assurance or you won't get approved. So you also, I really recommend doing your research when you're looking for an accountant to work with. There are people that do the application process on their own, but more than anything else, if I'm honest, there are a lot of people who do it wrong. So I would really recommend working with an experienced accountant, like I said, who understands EIS and SEIS, has gone through the process before, and also working with someone who specifically works in film and TV would probably be a real benefit as well. Now, the one other thing to know about EIS and SEIS is that a company needs to be younger than 5 years old in order to apply. If your company's 6 years old, you'll automatically be declined because your company's been around for a period of years that really feels like it's kind of established. Like I said, the whole point of EIS and SEIS is really to build new businesses and sustain business in the UK. So the biggest thing, if you don't know about anything else, but just be aware that EIS and SEIS cannot be used for a single project. There are people that I know that go through the process of trying to raise finance for EIS and SEIS, and what they'll look to do is use the funds from the raise to pay salaries, development funding. They may use some of the money for equity in some of their films, but the whole point is you're not just raising that money just for putting equity into films. You're really raising it for a business. Long term is the most important thing to remember. So that's a kind of quick summary on EIS and SEIS. I'm not going to go into that in any more detail. If you do want to talk to someone about the possibility of using EIS or SEIS, I would really recommend getting in touch with Dave Morrison from Nyman Lipson Poole. Yes, if you're curious as to why we have the same last name, he is my father, but he is a specialist in tax credit, UK tax credits, EIS, SEIS, film and TV, an accountant, all of this kind of stuff that realistically it's really helpful to have the connection before you need the connection a lot of the time. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the UK tax credit. Now, the UK tax credit is something that most of us are always aware of. We all know that it exists and that it's there and, all of that kind of stuff. But a lot of the time I talk to filmmakers and they're not really, especially if they've never made a film before, they're not really aware of the process behind the UK tax credit. So I thought we'd run through a bit of that first. So in order to qualify for the UK tax credit, you need, if you're making a film, you're the only production company involved, you need to complete a DCMS application. The application form is available through the BFI website, but be clear, DCMS is the Department of Culture, Media and Sport. I think it's a part of the government, basically. They are not part of the BFI. They just operate with the BFI. They work closely with them. They're not part of it. If you ever meet someone from DCMS, they don't like it when you say that they work for the BFI. They do not work for the BFI. You need to complete your application while you're in prep or in production on your film. But the other thing that's really important, and a lot of people sometimes get wrong, is that the application needs to be with the SPV company. So if anyone's not aware of what an SPV is a special purpose vehicle. It is an individual company that you set up in order to produce one film. So the way it normally works is that, let's say, for example, I've got my company Soul Cognition. So my production company is Soul Cognition. Soul Cognition will set up another company, and let's call it Film Limited for the sake of just coming up with a name. I'm going to set up Film Limited, okay? When I have a project that I've optioned, I'll option it into Soul Cognition. And then I'll do an agreement called a one picture license from Soul Cognition into Film Limited. And Film Limited will be the one that is actually responsible for producing the film. So basically what the one picture license says is, in a very quick summary way, is that Soul Cognition is assigning certain rights to Film Limited so that they can produce the film. Now, obviously, like I said, the Soul Cognition company owns the SPV, so we're in charge of it anyway, but the SPV will separately hire me individually as a producer, probably as a loan out from Soul Cognition, to act as the producer on the film. So again, producer agreements becoming part of one of your legal closing documents that we spoke about yesterday. So you need to set up an SPV for a feature film company. And the reason, there's a number of reasons we do that, and I don't want to go into it in too much detail, but mainly the reason that you would do that is that in Soul Cognition, I may have 10 different films that I've optioned or that I'm working on. I own the rights to more than one film. When investors invest in your film, they'll normally want to take security over the company that they're investing into. Now, I don't really want all of the investors to take security over every single project I'm working on, because they're not investing in all of the projects, they're only investing in one. So I'll set up an SPV, and all the investment, all of the security, all of that stuff goes into this one company, okay? So everything sits in that one company. And then later on down the line, I may decide I want to dissolve that company. I can reassign the rights back into Soul Cognition. But that won't be until after the film's been released and probably been around for a couple of years. So when you're setting up this SPV company, this is the company that needs to make the application for DCMS. So you'll need to have that company set up before you complete your application, so you can put the company name in. The reason it's really important to make sure that you do it with the right company is that, let's say, for example, you work with a financier that cash flows the tax credit for you. Now they're going to put their investment into the SPV company. But as such, because they're cash flowing the investment to the SPV company needs to be the one that will claim the tax credit. They will actually be the one that is claiming the tax credit. Because also, it has to be the company that spends all the money that claims all the money. So if everyone's investing over here into this film company, then I need them to invest all that money so I can spend all that money and claim the money through the same company. Now, like I said, if you don't do it through the right company, you can spend a lot of time, a lot of wasted time sometimes as well, trying to actually get the documents recertified and spend a lot of time on the phone with DCMS to say, I'm sorry, but I put it through the wrong company. Can you amend it? I've had to go through that process before. It's very frustrating. Okay, so you want to make sure you definitely do it in the right company. Now, again, when it comes to completing this application, if you haven't done it before, I really, really recommend that you start working with an experienced auditor, like a film accountant. When I say film accountant, I don't necessarily mean I don't actually mean your production accountant. I mean the accountant that will actually do the audit for you on the tax credit. So what you'll need is you'll need to find a company. So the most common ones tend to be Nyman Lipson Poole, there's Shipley's, I think Safri's does it as well. Those tend to be the three main companies that people work with in the film and TV industry for tax credits. there are people who have done it before with kind of general high street accountants. I really wouldn't recommend doing that because they don't understand the complexities of film. Okay, and you can spend, again, with anything, if you do it that way cheaply, you may find that you have a lot of problems later on down the line, which you could have solved if you would have worked with the right people who specialize in what we deal with. So the important thing you need to know as well about setting up your SPV company is that your SPV needs to be a limited company. It needs to be, I think it has to be a company limited by shares. Okay, it cannot be an LLC. If you set up an SPV company as an LLC, you will not qualify for the UK tax credit. It's really important to remember. The other thing about qualifying for the UK tax credit, if you are filming in any other countries as well, I mean, you have to go through the DCMS certification anyway. But let's say, for example, I am doing a film that also shoots in Nigeria, for example. Now, we don't have a co-production treaty with Nigeria, so therefore it doesn't qualify under a co-production. So if I decided to go and film some other stuff there, I need to make sure that at least at the very minimum, 10% of my budget, 10% of kind of core expenditure is spent in the UK. So sometimes what people will do is they will go and film somewhere else and they'll do all the post-production work in the UK because normally that's at least 10% of the budget. So you need to make sure that from all of the stuff that you, from your total budget, at least 10% is spent in the UK. Like I mentioned a minute ago with co-productions. Now, I'm just to clarify with co-productions as well, I'll sometimes get producers who come to me and say, oh, we're doing this as a co-production. And my first question is always, what do you mean by co-production? Because, for example, if you are two separate production companies, both based in the UK, that's not a co-production. Okay, that's not technically a co-production. A co-production is technically a film that is made under a co-production treaty. Okay, so in the case that you had two different production companies that were both working on the film, the most straightforward way to do that is to say that basically that SPV company that you set up, instead of just having one company own it, you just have both companies own that company. Therefore, you don't need a co-production agreement. It's not actually a co-production. Yes, there are two different people working from two different production companies on the film, but actually most of the terms you set around that can be dealt with in the producer agreements. By making it by calling it a co-production, you're essentially just making more paperwork for yourselves. So what you would actually do is you set up the SPV company and you give one share to each of the two production companies. So they both own that SPV company, because you can't actually have two separate production companies trying to claim the tax credit. You can only have one company that claims the tax credit. You can't have two production companies. So you both own the SPV, and in that SPV, you have producers agreements that say you're hiring this producer from that company as a loan out, and you're hiring this producer from that company as a loan out, and they're both working as producers. And any, approvals or, anything like that, any terms of who's in charge of what is put into the producer agreements. And that's how you do it. That's not a co-production. That's a film that's being made with producers from different companies. So just to clarify, co-productions are only productions that are made under a co-production treaty. Now, I think in the UK, we have, I think it's like either 10 or 12 different co-production treaties around the world, some of which you will use and some of which there is absolutely no point to use. So as an example, we have a co-production treaty with Jamaica, okay? There is absolutely no reason for you to ever use that co-production treaty because there's no soft funding that you can get from Jamaica. It's not like they have a tax credit. It's not like they have a commission that can give you money. They don't have a BFI or anything like that. The only reason that you normally use a co-production treaty is so you can access funding from somewhere else you're filming. If you're not able to access funding otherwise, you would just hire another company as a service producer to do the work in that region. That's all you do. Okay. That's not to say don't go and make films in Jamaica. There's also a co-production treaty with India. Again, same applies, no tax credit, no soft funding. So there's no point of doing under a co-production treaty. The thing you have to remember about a co-production is co-productions sound great, but they're also really expensive, and they also take longer to kind of close. The legal closing process of a co-production is much more complicated. And also a lot of the time you're dealing in multiple currencies as well. So you've got like exchange rate risk and things like that as well. So the best thing you can do is, if there is a co-production, you're thinking about making a co-production, you need to balance out what I get. So let's say I'll get 50K from doing it in this country, but it will also cost me 50K to do it as a co-production, because I'll have to have additional legal fees and all this kind of stuff. So realistically, it doesn't make any sense for me to raise the budget just to pay out more stuff to make it a co-production. So coming back to what we're talking about, if you are making a film under an official co-production treaty, you don't need to complete the cultural certificate, because via doing it as an official co-production and getting it stamped and everything like that, you qualify for the UK tax credit anyway, as long as it's with one of the countries that we have a co-production treaty with. If anyone's interested, we do have the European Convention, that is kind of the big kind of co-production treaty that we're under for co-producing with other countries in Europe. That's actually not going to be impacted by Brexit. This agreement actually is nothing to do with it doesn't stand under the EU. It's not related to our us being in the EU. So actually, once Brexit happens, we'll still be under that co-production treaty because it's separate. So we'll still be able to co-produce with countries in Europe. So just so you know. So the next thing that people often ask me about as well is, how do I work out how much my tax credit is going to be? Now, the first thing that people often get wrong about the UK tax credit is that they say it's a 25% credit. Well, that's not quite true. It's a 20% credit, because the UK tax credit will give you 25% of 80% of the qualifying spend, right? So basically, when you go into making, you try to get the UK tax credit, what they'll do is there is a long list of all the things that qualify for the UK tax credit. So like things that you will pay for, that they will say, okay, well, we can give you some tax credit against that. But not everything in your budget will qualify. So for example, E&O insurance doesn't qualify for the UK tax credit. Finance fees, so if you have a financier that's put some of their fees within the budget, that doesn't qualify. Bond fees don't qualify. Development costs don't qualify. So even in the case, let's say you didn't have any of the non-qualifying spend, right? In the best case scenario, you have 100% of your budget that is qualifying spend. Now, HMRC are only going to consider 80% of the qualifying spend. So you'll only ever get 80% of the qualifying spend. So that's like 4/5 of your budget. And from that qualifying spend, they'll only actually look at 25% of it. And 25% of 80% of 100% budget, only like the maths means that the maximum tax credit you could ever get, if 100% of your budget was qualifying, you'd still only get 20%. But realistically, most films do actually have non-qualifying spend in their budgets. So realistically, the maximum you'll ever get is 20%. Very unlikely that you'll ever get 20%. Realistically, when you're looking at your finance plan, I normally say to producers, assume that your UK tax credit estimate, if you're wholly making the film in the UK, if all of the work's being done in the UK, then you'll roughly get between 16 and 18% of your budget. Now, another thing that's really interesting about the UK tax credit is that we often use the term used and consumed. Okay. There's some people waiting in the waiting room. Can someone let them in? Because it's really distracting. It's in the middle of my screen. So basically what we have is that the rule of the UK tax credit is used and consumed. So again, let's say that we've got a film that, for example, we've got cast that we're hiring who are US based. Now, irrelevant of the fact that they're US based, you still may be paying them over in the US. You may be paying an account over in the US, but the work that they've done was done in the UK. They did the work in the UK. And as such, their fees still qualify for the UK tax credit. Even if you're paying another country, they did the work here. Okay, so you can still get, if someone else is from another country and come and does work in the UK, you still qualify, you can still qualify against that UK tax credit. Sorry, I've got like something on my face that's really itchy, and I'm very aware of that fact. I keep itching my nose. So you've got to remember used and consumed. Now, that also works in the reverse. So a really good example of that is if you think about Bond films. So Bond films, sometimes, you know, they'll buy British cars, they'll buy things in the UK, but they'll take them to another country and use them somewhere else. If you do that, things are not, they don't necessarily qualify. That doesn't qualify into the UK tax credit. So let's say, for example, I was making a film that I bought all of my costume in the UK. I bought all of the costumes in the UK and I shipped them all over to Spain, and I was doing it all in Spain. I used all of the costumes in Spain. Now, irrelevant of the fact that I bought them in the UK, I used them somewhere else. So that spend does not qualify for the UK tax credit. Okay. So again, this is another reason why if you're making a film that you shoot something in another country, you are lowering your UK tax credit, your estimated amount. Now, I hope that's really clear to everyone. So generally, if you're making a film that's wholly shot in the UK, assume 16 to 18% of your budget. I personally always go for the 16% level. And the reason I do that as well is because the fact that I'd much rather have surprise money than go too high and realize that I have a shortfall in my finance plan later on. So the next thing we're going to talk about is claiming the credit. So the process is, you know, I've got a film that I'm ready to make. I set up my limited company. I do one picture license into that company. I then do the application for DCMS and I get approved and I go away and I shoot my film and I spend all my money. I do my posts, I deliver the film, and I can make a claim for the UK tax credit of based on what I've spent at any point. So you'll find that sometimes people might say, okay, well, I'm about halfway through filming, but I've spent 40% of my budget already. And so I might do an interim tax credit claim now. So it means that anything that I've already spent, I can get the credit on right now. And the reason that you do that as well is if you've got someone who's cash flowing your UK tax credit, then you can pay them back early and maybe their interest will go down. But also with some films, you don't always need to have the tax credit cash flows. You may not, your investors may not require it of you. So as a result, I can make a claim for everything that I've spent so that when that money comes in, I have more money for the production and I can spend it. Right? The big thing about the UK tax credit is you can make as many claims as you want. Not all countries around the world, there are tons of tax credits and rebates around the world, tax incentives, but some of them you can only claim once. So in the places that you can only claim once, you'd obviously go away, you finish your whole film, and then at the very end of it, when everything's spent, that's when you make your claim. Like I said, in the UK, you can make multiple claims on the UK tax credit. So you could make a bunch of claims during production. You could make multiple claims after you finish the film, based on the fact that you spent money. So every single time there's another, you know, a good portion, because you've still got to go through, you probably, you know, have to pay your auditor to do all these, you know, check all of your books and all this kind of stuff and make the application to to HMRC, but you could do it infinite times. It's also really important to remember as well that if anyone agrees to defer their fees, because when you do deferrals, and this is another thing that I'll just mention now, a deferral is different than lowering someone's fee, okay? So the way that deferrals normally work is, let's say, for example, I'm a producer on a film and my budget, and in the budget,
of the film, I'm being paid £100. Okay, my total producer fee is £100. Now, I may agree to defer £50 of my fee. So I'm agreeing to defer half of my fee. In the budget, the deferral that my fee in the budget stays at £100. But then I put the amount that I'm deferring, that £50, into the finance plan of the film. And that £50 that I've deferred is not a payment that's made like, you know, if we have any money left at the end, we'll pay it to you. No, the way it works is that that deferral gets paid in the recoupment waterfall. And where it gets paid in the recoupment waterfall is down to negotiation with my financiers. So I may have all of the financiers of the film, so everyone who put in money in the film, plus their interest ahead of me in the recoupment waterfall. So all of the film has to make so much money that they all get their money back before I get my deferred fee. Okay, this is why often with independent film, if you ever agree to defer your fee, in most cases, you'll never get it, which is why I recommend that no one ever defers all of their fee, because you're basically working for free. But let's say in the example that I worked in a film that was incredibly successful and my deferred fee got paid, I could then do, even after, you know, the film might have been released for 2 years at this point, I could still make another claim to HMRC for the portion of the tax credit that I'd be due on that fee. So again, it's not even that you could make multiple claims during, you know, the process. So I could do 2 claims during the whole of the production. I could do 1 when I've actually delivered the film and I've spent all the money. And then if I had deferrals, maybe 2 years later, I can make another claim. So I get that tax credit money coming back from whatever I've paid. So when you are claiming a tax credit, like I said, it is really good to work with a film specific auditor, an accountancy firm that's experienced in film and TV, that know how to make these claims for the UK tax credit. Because as I've said, and I pretty much always say, I'm a bit like a broken record, it's important to work with people who understand film. I've seen a lot of people who have tried to work with lawyers outside of the film industry. And to be quite honest with you, all it does is slow everything down. It makes everything a lot slower than it could be, because of the fact that basically they don't understand the world of film. They don't understand the specifics of it. So people are having to take time to explain things, or taking time to go over points in multiple ways. And because there's a lack of understanding, it takes even longer for something to get over the line. It works the same with accountants from outside of the film industry as well. Generally, if you are trying to access the UK tax credit, especially on a first feature, work with an accountant who is from the film and TV industry, and make sure you engage them quite early on, because they can be really helpful in advising you about, for example, how to set up your company, the application for DCMS, because there's certain parts that it's all a points-based system. If you have enough points in certain areas, you don't need to complete all of the application. But if you do complete bits that you don't need to, you might end up making more work for yourself later on down the line. So always try and engage them quite early on, because they're there to advise you and they're there to help you. But remember as well, their fee should be in the budget of the film. So again, you need to make sure that you engage them early on, so that you can also say to them, how much do you think it's going to cost, so I can put it in my budget? So give yourself time with these things, because the application itself is not difficult. It's just the fact that it takes a lot of time, like all applications do. But the more you can get advice, the easier you're making it for yourselves later on down the line. Now, and on VAT as well, which is kind of a related thing as well. So again, important to have that accountant on board. Don't forget that VAT is not included within the budget of a film. So your actual film's production budget should not include any cost of any VAT. The reason that we don't include VAT is because in the UK, when you set up your company, when you go, before you go into production, before you start spending money, you'd register your company for VAT. And each quarter you'll do a VAT reclaim. You shouldn't have to pay any VAT because of the fact that you have not, made any sales or anything like that, but you've paid for VAT, you've paid out VAT. And so you need to make sure that you're doing each quarter, you've got an accountant who's on top of all the books and is reclaiming all of the money that you spent on VAT, because that money should come back to the production to be spent again. Okay, so don't forget VAT registration, and each quarter you'll be putting in those applications and reclaiming that money. The only thing that you do need to be aware of when it comes to VAT, that there are 2 different types of crowdfunding campaigns. Okay, and if you ever decide that you want to do a crowdfunding campaign for film, normally what people end up using is a rewards-based crowdfunding platform. So think about Kickstarter, for example. If you go on, sorry everyone, I'm losing my voice. So most of the time, when you go onto a crowdfunding platform, you'll have those tiers of investment. So it might be £5, give us £5 and we're just really grateful to you. Give us £20 and we'll send you a DVD. Give us £50 and we'll give you a DVD and a video from the cast. Give us this and we'll get, you know, but each of those levels where you're giving a reward, normally they're actually products, and HMRC sees those things as you making a sale. Okay, so it's not actually an investment as far as HMRC are concerned, apart from that £5 level where you just said, thanks. Everything else is a sale. And as such, you should be charging VAT on those things. So from whatever you receive, whatever someone invests at that £20 level, you know, you should have VAT either built into that or on top of it. So you need to be aware of that, because HMRC, if you go through this process and you don't charge VAT, HMRC will slam you down with a really big VAT bill at the end of it. So remember, if you do that, if you do a crowdfunding campaign where you offer any rewards, you need to charge VAT. Now, for anyone who was with us yesterday, I said that I would touch on recruitment waterfalls today. And I'm going to talk about recruitment waterfalls. And I think then afterwards, we're just going to go into some general advice and then some Q&A. So if anyone does have any questions, I will also say I have a fundamental rule. There's no such thing as a silly question. You should always ask a question in order to understand something. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to laugh at any of your questions, and no one's going to think you're stupid. And if they do, they're a not nice person, so ignore them anyway. If you have any questions, ask them. It's better for you to ask than to not understand something. So going back to this, what's a recruitment waterfall? A recruitment waterfall is a document which outlines how each of the parties within your film will be repaid. We're talking about your financiers and your investors here, in what order they'll be paid and from what collateral they'll be paid, as well as exactly what interest they're going to charge as well. So the way it would work is, let's say that I have 3 investors in my film and I also have a sales agent. Okay, so the sales agent will charge a sales fee and sales expenses, and normally they'll recoup before any of the financiers, because that's a cost. It's not that they're recouping, it's they've made sales and they're charging you for making those sales and doing the delivery and all this kind of stuff. So you have the sales agent, which will recoup ahead of the financiers. And then those 3 financiers, you have to agree who's going to be paid in what order. Where is everyone going to be paid? You can either do it where each party gets paid after another, or you can sometimes do what we refer to as a corridor. So they could all recoup at the same time, for example, or maybe you've got one financier that's going to recoup first, but the second financier is going to have a corridor. So it means that they'll have like a percentage of everything that comes in. So that number 1 financier will only actually be getting 95%, financier 2 might be getting 5%, and financier 3 might be sitting after both of them. So again, it's who's going to get paid when. And I always think, you know, the reason it's a waterfall is because money trickles down like this. And so each person will be paid in the order that they get paid. So obviously most of the money will sit at the top until there's enough money to repay everyone. So like I said, it's not only your film's financiers, but it also can include your sales agent, collection agent, and payment of any residual reserves. Residual reserves are the union payments that you would make to predominantly SAG, DGA, and WGA if you have people who are contracted under those guilds for your film. You don't have to contract people under any of those guilds if you're working in the UK. Specifically in the UK as well, we have we more often use PACT than we do the other guilds. So especially if you're working with British cast, you would, even if they are SAG registered, you would probably put them under a PACT agreement, because in the UK we can use PACT. But generally, if you do ever work on a film that you contract people under SAG, DGA and WGA, then there's a total of 9.8% that those three guilds will charge together. So again, it costs more to contract under those guilds. The recruitment waterfall that you kind of agree in principle with all of your financiers will form the basis of your CAMA. So that's your collection agent management agreement. I mentioned it briefly yesterday. Most independent films will work with a collection agent, which is a third-party company that the production will hire in order to, their job is to basically collect all of the revenue that's made from all of the different sales into the film. So you say to all of your distributors, please pay into this collection account. And the collection agent will then send out all of the money to each of the people in the order that your recruitment waterfall says. And basically you'll have all of your financiers sign up to a CAMA in order to be able to say, right, okay, we've all agreed, this is how everyone's getting repaid from all the money that's coming in. It's a very hefty agreement, and normally it does actually make up part of your legal closing. But apart from that, so you have your recruitment waterfall, and the very last thing is on the recruitment waterfall is the net profit share. So all of the money will go to paying all of the financiers and investors and your sales agents and whoever else is being paid in the recruitment waterfall. And after that, that's when the money gets into net profit. That's when it gets into net profits. So again, most independent films never get into net profits. I have worked on over 100 feature films and about 3 of them have got to net profits. So 3 out of 100, statistically, there's not a lot of films that get into net profits. And actually, if anyone's interested, strangely enough, the ones that have got into net profits are actually the low budget ones I've worked on. That all 3 films that have got into net profits have all been low budget films. So they were all films under $5 million US. Again, if anyone's interested, the most common collection agents that we work with in film and TV are Freeway and Vintage. Both long established, most financiers in the whole of the industry are happy to work with both of them. I have actually never worked with a collection agent who is not one of these 2 collection agents. So again, they're good people just to know. They can also be really helpful when it comes to auditing distributors. So the reason that you might need to audit a distributor is, let's say, for example, you have a film that you sold to a distributor in Japan, for example, and when it was, maybe there's some documents out there that have said that this film made loads and loads of money at the theatrical box office and your distributor hasn't sent you any more money. You may go down the route of, you ask the distributor, can you please send us a report to see how much money you've made, to see if you owe us anything else. If they don't do that, you can use your collection agent to actually go out and audit them to work out how much money they possibly owe you. So they can be very, very helpful. Just to summarize again on net profits, the way that it's commonly worked on in film is that you have 100% pot split down the middle, 50% for the producers, and from the producers' share, you have producers' allocation, directors, cast, crew, writers, all of the kind of creative people who physically work on the film. And then you have the financiers' share of the other 50% pot. So all of the financiers in the film will have a share from the financiers' share. Predominantly, your equity investors will take the majority of the financiers' share. If you do ever work with a debt financier, they may want a share, but normally you would expect it to be a lot lower, because normally a debt financier is in first position. They're like the first position financier to recoup, but also they're collateralized lending. So they're not taking as much risk as the other equity investors that are sitting behind them. So normally, in most cases now, you'll find that debt financiers will ask for a net profit share, but it would normally be, not the majority of the pot. Even though they might be the majority financier, they won't take the majority of the pot because they're not taking the most risk. So realistically, your equity investors get more because they're putting more risk in. So more risk, more reward if the film works out really well. And so then just onto some final advice before we get onto Q&A. So the first thing is, and I mentioned it before, but co-produce with caution. be aware that the more parties you have, often the more complicated the closing is, the more problems that you need to solve, and also the more parties involved, the more cost. But also, as I mentioned earlier as well, if you are ever looking to make a film under a co-production treaty, be aware of the fact that getting a film over the line, you need to weigh up how much money am I going to get from the other side to make this a co-production, and how much extra is it going to cost me? Because you, like I said, you may get, let's say you get an extra 200K out of doing it as a co-production, but how much more is it going to cost you to make that co-production happen? Because you've also got to remember, it's not just, you know, extra legal fees, but let's say, for example, I decide that I'm going to do a couple of scenes of filming in a different country. Well, that means that I also have to pay more for travel costs. I also have to pay more for accommodation in another country, because if I wanted to work with some of the same crew that I'm working with, I need to fly them over and I need to put them up somewhere. I also will probably have to pay more in cast fees, because the schedule will be longer and I've actually got to pay travel days as well. All of these things is really important to keep in mind, because it's not just, oh, great, I get another 200K. It's what's the cost? What's the cost for doing it that way? Also, like I said, maybe you were planning to do all of the filming in the UK, and then you thought, oh, well, if I did this portion of the film in this country, I could do it under the co-production, and this company, or, you know, I can get some soft money from here. Okay, theoretically great, but also by taking any of the work you're planning to do in the UK out of the UK, you also lower your UK tax credit as well. The next thing is build a finance plan from strong foundations. Now, if you are ever making a film that you're expecting everything to be done in the UK, the very first thing I would put in my finance plan is UK tax credit, especially if the film is set in the UK, if you're using UK cast, if your director is British, if your writer is British, if your producer is British, you know, all of these things mean that you're likely to qualify for the UK tax credit. And therefore, I normally start with, okay, let's put in 16% for the UK tax credit. Now, what else do I think I can get realistically? Because it's important to say, I kind of mentioned this yesterday, but if you're making a horror film, for example, I wouldn't put the BFI in my finance plan, because I'm unlikely to get money from them, because it's a commercial type genre. So start with things that you think it's realistic to get, and then build from there. Don't start by going, oh, I think maybe I get some pre-sales. Well, how do you know you can get some pre-sales? Have you started having conversations with sales agents? Have you started having conversations with distributors? Unless you started having those conversations, it's going to be quite difficult to establish whether you think that's realistic or not. So start with things that you believe that are likely and realistic to get. I've also put 2 points here that I'm just going to summarize quickly together, but work with an experienced auditor, or specifically tax accountant and accountants generally for film. You will save yourself so many headaches in the long run by working with people with experience, versus trying to work with, you know, your local accountant from a high street firm who doesn't understand the ins and outs of film. It will just make the whole process much more difficult, and filmmaking is difficult anyway. Why give yourself extra stress? The next point is, if a deal seems too good to be true, it probably is. And a film doesn't belong to you, it's a collaboration. I think I might have said that one yesterday, but I genuinely think it's one of those things that you should say multiple times. It's a collaboration. There are so many people that work on films. Remember that you have to collaborate with everyone. It's really, really important, because everyone has just as much value. And that is everything for today. I've got my contact details again up here. And if anyone is interested in joining any of our future courses as well, please feel free to check out our website. And I'm going to stop sharing now. Cool. Do we have questions? Everyone's muted. I'm on my own.
Just wanted to say thank you so much for that, Jasmine.
We do.
I'll hand over now.
Awesome. So I've managed to capture 3 questions. So the first one is the EIS/SEISS available to registered charities or charitable incorporated organizations not registered with Companies House?
don't know, actually. That's a really good question. No one's ever asked me before. I would think probably not. I guess the biggest thing would be a question of how you would expect to pay back your investors. Because realistically, it's enterprise investment, so therefore you're looking for something that's going to turn over a profit. Charities don't tend to turn over profits. I mean, I would personally, if you're interested in exploring it, I would reach out to a company that does do EIS and SEIS, like a accountancy firm that's familiar with it, and ask them the question. I've never seen a charity try to get EIS or SEIS.
Awesome. So how is the tax credit calculated? Is it that the company will be taxed on the income from investments, or the tax you spend, example, income tax, VAT, etc., or both?
So it more has to do with what's the total of what you've spent. So it's a credit, right? So basically, HMRC will look at everything you spent and they'll give you a portion of it back. So when I talked earlier about, let's say you have a budget, and for argument's sake, just for easy numbers, let's say you have a budget and everything is qualified, like all of this money you've spent qualifies for the UK tax credit. So the total of everything that you've spent is qualified. They'll only look at 80% of that. They're not going to look at 100%. They're going to ignore 20% of it. But that 80% that you've spent, you know, all of the total costs, they will then take 25% of it, and then you will basically get that 25% back. And the thing is that's great about the UK tax credit as well is HMRC directly fund that money back into like once it's all been approved and they've checked all the books and they're happy with everything, they directly put that money back into the account of your choosing. So you physically get the money back. That's actually technically called a tax rebate, although we call it tax credit in the UK. There are certain tax incentives in the US, I think there's probably 3 or 4 of them, that are credits instead of rebates, where you don't physically get the money back. You get given what's called a credit note that you then have to sell on to someone else that they can use it to offset some of their tax in that jurisdiction. So I'm not going to go into it, but just basically it's based on 100% of whatever those things, you know, 100% of the costs that you spent for all of the things that qualify. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that made perfect sense. Also, yay, money back. So the next question we've got is, can you list the recommended EIS application accountants and the recommended auditor accountants again?
Yeah, I mean, the first one, like I said, is Nyman Libson Poole. So it's actually in the presentation. I wrote their name in the advice section at the end. So NYMAN space LIBSON space Poole. They have been around for a number of years. The company actually, at this time of year, quite ironically, they kind of have been working in the industry. I think they've been around for 85 years. But so Nyman Libson Poole, they work on EIS, SCAS, and they can also work with you when it comes to tax credits as well. The other ones that people tend to use are Safri's and Shipley's.
Awesome, thank you for that. And where's the best place to find lawyers and accountants in film? And is this the same as an entertainment lawyer?
Entertainment lawyers to me are always a little bit woolly. So an entertainment lawyer can be someone who works in like music, which is again different to film. Generally, I mean, put it this way, a quick Google search, if you just write film lawyer UK, is always quite an easy one to do. But also, I found quite a lot of people, you know, getting recommendations on Facebook groups, if I'm honest. So I'm part of groups like, there's a group called LIFT, which is Ladies in Film and TV. There's Project Noir, which is for Black filmmakers. Like I've just found them as like incredible resources. So if you ever just say, because I mean, I think in most cases people will not always be looking to work with the big firms because the big firms tend to be more expensive. But yeah, there's
I mentioned a company yesterday as well called Level K, but also there's just a lot of solicitors out there. And I mean, the best thing to do most of the time is to ask people that you know. Do you know any, independent solicitors that work in film and TV? But like I said, a quick Google search can be a really great tool. But Facebook groups, I have to say, for everyone who's like any Gen Zs out there who are like, Facebook is for old people, it's like, yeah, but it's a really great resource if you need advice for filmmakers.
Is there anywhere we can get an example of finance plans with tax credits and Recoup Waterfall included?
Not really. And the thing is I would be aware of is the fact that every finance plan looks different and every recoupment waterfall looks different. There is no kind of set way that you'll find that they all match in any way. I mean, generally, if you are working with a collection agent, normally what you'll see is the collection agent will recoup first. Then you'll have, if you are working with any of the guilds I mentioned, SAG, DGA, WGA, then they'll have their residual reserves. Then you'll have your sales agent. And then if you're working with a debt financier, then they'll recoup. But apart from that, everything is down to negotiation. So it's really down to what can you negotiate with all your different financiers of who sits where. If you do ever work with a post-production company who gives you equity, or a VFX company, they're quite often happy to sit near the end. So they're normally quite flexible of where they sit. But if you are working with a debt financier, they won't sit anywhere apart from the first position financier. So it's really difficult. It's really difficult to find those things, but mostly it's because of the fact that people don't necessarily want to share who their financiers are more than anything else. And finance plans can be quite complicated and confusing. So it really just comes down to who can you get, what can you get from them, and where are they happy to sit, what can you negotiate best. Like I said, I can't think of anywhere where you'd be able to find these things apart from, if you do know other filmmakers who have made films before, ask them if you can have a look at their finance plans. Because you'll find that people are much more likely to share that kind of information with you if you know them. People generally don't tend to really put it out on the internet or anything like that.
And Blaise said, sorry if I missed this yesterday, but could you give us some examples of who equity financiers might be?
Yeah, so most commonly in the UK, you'll have the BFI, the other regional funders like Creative Wales, Screen Scotland, Northern Ireland Screen. You've also got the Yorkshire Film Fund, Liverpool Film Commission, the West Midlands Fund that's run by Creative England, BBC, Channel 4, and then you'll also have kind of the mini majors or bigger kind of indie distributors. So, E1, Studio Canal, Lionsgate, Sky, who else? I think those are most of the big ones that I've mentioned already. Universal as well. They tend to be the kind of bigger, maybe slightly more easy to access because of the fact that they operate within the industry. Apart from that, the majority of time, what you'll find is in the UK, equity comes from private sources. So it will be, high net worth individuals who are interested in investing into film. Be aware that there are quite a lot of people who operate as an executive producer in film, who may have a pool of investors that are interested in, investing in film and things like that. I would say be cautious of working with an executive, an EP, and ask them what they're going to charge you up front, because there are a lot of EPs that will say, okay, well, I'll help you to try and raise some finance, but they might ask you for a really big fee up front. But be aware of the fact there's no guarantee they're going to help you. They're going to necessarily be able to help you raise any money. So I always I personally wouldn't work with an EP who demanded a big fee up front unless they could guarantee they would get me, a certain amount of money. Apart from that, there's a couple of smaller places as well. I mean, put it this way, equity in the UK is not easy to find. And I mentioned this yesterday as well, but generally it's easier to raise equity finance from the US than it is to raise equity finance from the UK. But again, it's really comes down to networking. Again, I other equity sources would be post-production and VFX deals. So a post-production deal, you go to a post-production company who can do all of this work. You know, they do all of the online, conform, grade, sound, delivery work. And they might give you some kind of equity investment. Now, normally it would work out to about 20% of whatever the post quote is. So they'll invest a certain amount of money up front. You'll pay them for all of the post services, and they'll also recoup what they put in the recoupment waterfall. They tend to be quite a good source, especially for first-time filmmakers. And the reason being is that the hardest money to raise is normally the first piece and the last piece, because the last piece is, you know, if you've got 10% left that you need to raise and you've already asked all of your financiers to put in the most they can, finding the person that wants to sit behind everyone else can be really difficult. So often going to a post-production company will secure you the first bit of money. So someone else has already committed to giving you a certain amount of money before you get to the stage of having to go out and raise the really big pieces, but someone's been the first to invest, or first to willing to invest.
I've got a question. So you spoke a little bit about corridors within raising finance and recouping finance. Is it possible to implement a corridor for a producer or a member of the filmmaking team if you're making a deal with a financier?
You can definitely try. If I'm honest, I would say that the financiers are probably very unwilling to do that. I mean, the big thing you've got to remember as well is that when you're looking at your budgets, right, the producer's fee, because I mean, let's really be honest, in most cases, producers are normally making like one film a year. And as such, they need to be able to build into the budget a producer's fee that will pay them enough for a year, basically, because they don't know if they'll get any other revenue source in that year period. But as a result, you're getting a fee in the budget and you're getting paid for the work you're doing. And therefore, the financiers who have put in all of the money, and part of the money has been used to pay your fee, why should they wait for you to get extra money before they start making any money? Or before, no, it's not making money, they're getting repaid for what they've already put in. And the thing is, you know, the producer's share of net profits, that 50%, it's down to the producers to make the best negotiation they can in order to be able to keep as much of that for themselves as they can. Now, the thing is that I find really interesting, what you'll often find is that the bigger the cast you're working with, the more they're going to ask for, obviously. But generally, you can expect them to ask between 5 and 10% for a lead cast member. Supporting roles don't always necessarily get net profits, especially if they're not kind of a named actor. But like I said, it's down to negotiation, because what you'll often find is producers put in like a producer fee and a production company overhead into the budget. So like I said, you're getting a number of fees in the budget of the film for the work that you're doing. If the film, and it's down to you how good the film is, because the financiers aren't on set with you making decisions every single day and having the best thing come out of it. You know, you're getting paid for that work in the budget of the film. And therefore, if the film goes out and is released, because there's a very real possibility that none of your financiers ever, you know, get fully repaid. So why should we allow you to take money before we get all of our money back? Is normally the financier mindset.
Very much understood. Do we have any more questions? I know Yaz said, thank you very much, Jasmine. And thank you very much, Jasmine. This has been really insightful.
Thanks. Thanks to some queens out there. I would just say that, you know, again, when it comes to film finance, it can always be quite complicated. But like I said yesterday, for anyone who wasn't there, by the fact that you're here in the first place, asking questions and being engaged, you're already learning more than a lot of producers and, you know, people in the industry know. So just, it's all about learning, and there is always new things that crop up on every single film. because as much as it would be really easy if we could all just use the same finance plans and recruitment waterfalls and the same documents every single time, be aware that every single film you ever work on, you're starting from scratch again and again and again. So it's always difficult, but at the end of the day, people are out there doing it, and there are lots of people out there doing it, so it can always be done. There's nothing standing in your way apart from normally how hard you're willing to work and how much you're hoping to, you know, make connections. It's all of that stuff. A lot of the power most of the time is in your hands. It's an exhausting industry to work in, and sometimes I'm sure everyone in this call has woken up one morning and gone, why did I decide to do this? I should have become an accountant or a lawyer or a nurse, you know, but at the end of the day, we're passionate storytellers, and that's what we do.
Agreed, absolutely agreed. And I think that's a perfect way to end the session. So thank you everyone for coming. There is a survey in the chat, if you would please wouldn't mind filling that in. It helps us get funding, which means we can bring more events like this to you. Can we have a phantom round of applause for Jasmine, who's been incredible, not just today but yesterday as well. And a recording of this will be available to everyone that signed up using the Eventbrite link. So thank you for that, and have a good day and stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.